Welcome back to Talk of the Town on 99.7, 1450 WHTC and WHTC.com.
Welcome you back to Talk of the Town for this Wednesday, December 15th. I'm Gary Stevens. Well, once a month, we have a chance to catch up with things going on at the office of the County Clerk and Register of Deeds in Ottawa County. Justin Roebuck joins us from the Fillmore, I believe, the Fillmore Street complex today, not the county courthouse in Grand Haven. Good morning, Justin.
Good morning, Gary. Thanks for having me here.
I just want to make sure we have you definitely located. It's via the Zoom connection. And if you have a question for Justin, he'll be happy to take it at 616-395-1450, 616-395-1450. Let's get this out of the way first. We have some holidays coming up. And so when will people not be able to utilize the office in an in-person basis, Justin?
Yeah, so we do have a couple of closures. The week of Christmas, we have Thursday and Friday are county holidays. So it'd be the 23rd and 24th of December. All county offices are closed. And then again on the New Year holiday, because of course it falls on a weekend, the closure is on December 31. So New Year's Eve, the county offices are closed as well.
So, but online, of course, many transactions can still be done. That does not close. But keep in mind that if, you have to have something done on a certain deadline. What if somebody does have a deadline to have something done by December 31st? They do it online before the 31st. That still count, even though it will not be processed by your office until after the 1st?
Yeah, it depends on what the transaction is. Obviously, for land records, sometimes that's an important one that people try to get done within a tax year. So within the calendar year, sometimes we pick up that week quite a bit in terms of property transfer. So that does have to get either electronically recorded with us by that deadline, or of course in person. And so if you mail something in, we're going to receive it. It's going to be marked as received the date that we open that mail. Excuse me, frog in my throat.
That's quite all right. But the thing is, when I was referring to maybe some transactions time-wise that are done online.
Oh, right. And online transactions are marked essentially the time that you do that transaction. And so you're covered there. In terms of submitting documents to us electronically that campaign finance related or anything like that. So online services remain open, and the day that you transact it is the day that it's marked as received.
All right, just want to get that clarified. If you have a question for Justin Roebuck, he'll be happy to answer it at 616-395-1450, 616-395-1450. I believe it is your office that takes numbers and jots down, counts names, baby names for the year coming up. And I know that if not the first board meeting, maybe the second, you need to disclose just how many new people are in the county and what names they're having. Any early indications on what would be the most popular in the county?
It caught me off guard with that question. I guess that was a hardball, Gary. I don't have any any insight as to that yet, but I will get something. And actually, I'll make a promise that WHTC listeners will be the first to know the top baby names in Ottawa County for 2021. That's always kind of a fun thing.
Yeah, it is kind of a fun thing. It's also a good barometer for those who are going to have babies in 2022. All right, which ones are trending, which ones are not? And it'll be interesting to see when you take a look at the numbers for 2021. I want to call this the Karen aspect of how many young girls would be called Karen in 2021, and compare that to, say, 10, 20, 30 years ago, now that there's a stigma attached to the name Karen.
Very true, right? Those names, it's fascinating to see the names that come in and out of fashion from year to year. And obviously, as we all know, anybody with young kids right now who, have got a lot of classmates named, Olive and Esther, and some of those older names have circulated back. That's for sure.
And of course, some of the more popular celebrities always get the names put before them, but that's something we can look forward to in 2022. Let me get on something that is kind of serious, and it's the election situation. You are not a happy camper because there were some election issues you were hopeful of having been addressed by the legislature. They weren't addressed. And what are the biggest things that you might be talking to the lawmakers about? Try to do something in 2022.
Yeah, all this talk of 2022, obviously it is right around the corner. And that also means not just a calendar year, but an election, a significant election for our voters. And really, they've been failed by our leadership this year. We've come into this cycle. Amazing to think about, because we have had an unprecedented number of pieces of legislation that have been debated and discussed. Over 130 pieces of legislation with regard to elections. And out of that 130, just a handful have actually passed the House and Senate, and virtually none have been signed by the governor. So I think, as election administrators, we're really feeling the pinch as we literally in the next month or so are going to be preparing for this next year, and realizing that there are some really common sense, nonpartisan, non-controversial issues that we need to get done for our voters, to make some improvements in the process, to make our elections better, more secure, better accessibility for our voters. These are things our voters deserve. And it's being held up, frankly, by a national partisan narrative on both sides. I'm not, putting any one party out front here, but I think the partisan narrative, unfortunately, is seen on both sides. And we've got some things that don't matter from the political standpoint, but that really do matter from the administrative standpoint that we would like to see done.
Yeah. A couple of things along the lines of elections. First of all, earlier this week, the Republican congressional delegation have sent a letter to the current Secretary of State of Michigan, Jocelyn Benson, basically saying Michigan voter rolls need to be cleaned up. I'm going to say, wait a minute on one thing. Shouldn't that be cleaned up really on the county and local levels, and not just say, well, it's the Secretary of State's fault? It's the local clerks that can do the job right off the bat.
Absolutely. Very good point. And speaking of partisan narratives, we need to be clear about what problems need to be solved. So this indication, I believe the Secretary of State's office is being sued over 26,000 names that are on the voter rolls of voters who have been deceased. But just to put that in perspective, not saying that 26,000 names on the voter rolls is a good thing of deceased voters. We certainly need the tools and the resources to clean that up and make sure that our voter rolls are pristine. Really important to note, though, that in March of this year, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson removed 177,000 names from Michigan voter rolls. Essentially, these names were already on the cancellation process. Voters who moved out of state, voters who were deceased, obviously come off immediately as the Secretary of State or local and county clerks receive that information. But we're working hard every day to clean the voter rolls. What we need to do is give local clerks, county clerks, and the Secretary of State better tools for cleaning that data. We have 8 million records on the voter rolls, and those records are changing by the thousands every day, right? When you have records, it's data, it needs to be cleaned up. A lot of times voters get missed if they don't have a driver license, an active current driver license on file. And then, for example, like an assisted living home, for example. So someone moves into assisted living, and maybe they haven't driven for a number of years. And then their assisted living facility is outside of the jurisdiction where they're registered to vote. So that can create a challenge. And again, it should be caught. I'm not making any excuses for 26,000 names. Those things need to be caught. But putting it in perspective, that's a relatively low number. And the other important factor that we have to consider is, did these individuals, are they on record as having voted? And resoundingly, that is not the case. That would certainly be a concern because that's election fraud, right? So we're talking about a data problem that could open the door to potential for fraud, and we don't want that. But that's an important distinction that I think our voters need to hear.
Change of address is one thing. Does I don't want to say your office, but does the local clerk get notified of a change of address or perhaps a death situation where a flag might come up and it can be addressed? Do we have that technology or not yet?
We do, and actually that's one of our common sense proposals to the legislature and to the governor. We need to do this. Currently, county clerks do not have authority under Michigan law to remove a deceased voter. That authority goes to the local clerk and to the Secretary of State. And so currently on the death process with deceased voters, there's two ways that a voter can come off. Every month, the county clerk sends what we call the death list. It's not a very positive term, but because we are the recipient of death records and the keeper of our death records in the county, we send a monthly list to the local clerks indicating the voters who are deceased, and the local clerks are able to remove those. Simultaneously, while that is happening, MDHHS at the state level, as well as the Social Security Administration, are pinging the records of the Secretary of State's office. And so that's a great double check, obviously, on the process. However, the county clerk is the source of the death record. So we think it makes a whole lot of common sense to allow the county clerk, as we receive and verify the record of the deceased voter, we can immediately remove them. We can still keep those other checks and balances in place, but it basically adds a third layer, and we believe a more direct avenue for the voter rolls to be maintained and maintained well.
Yeah. Again, common sense. And as technology improves and the ability to coordinate things improve, at least in Michigan, make sure the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. I think it's a good way of putting it. Granted, when you're dealing with interstate situations where a resident who may be registered to vote in Florida passes away in Michigan, then it could gum up the works, and we're still not that further along yet. But it would be nice to be able to do that.
I totally agree. And I think there's been a lot of discussion at the federal level about changes with our election systems. I'm always more cautious about that because I think it's so important for states to maintain sovereignty over their elections processes. But I think one really critical thing the federal government could do is fund a system where essentially we have an interstate compact that notifies each state of voters that move in and out of those states. So currently we are a participant in an interstate compact that does that, but it's a voluntary system. There's 39 states that are participating. And, luckily some of the bigger states that we interact with, like Florida and Arizona, are part of that. So a Michigan voter decides to move to Florida or Arizona, or 36 other states in the country. We do get notification at the Secretary of State level that voter has moved, and there's a way that we can transition them off the voter rolls. But again, that seems like something that should be funded at the federal level and that should be provided for at the federal level, not necessarily a national voter registration list, but a way for all 50 states to be able to communicate together and figure that out. Like you say, technology is there. We can do this, and we just need resources.
Justin, I hesitate to bring this subject up because, frankly, it's shall we say, stirring up ashes and embers of a fire that frankly should have died out over a year ago. And that is the 2020 election. There's still some aftermath about it. Next Tuesday, a group called auditmy.org plans to present petitions, nearly 500 signatures on petitions, mandating that the legislature have a full forensic audit bill in the books. I hesitate to even bring this up, Justin, because we've discussed this before, and I'm sorry, it's a year late, day late, dollar short on it, just in my opinion. But as a clerk, come on, let's move on, can't we?
Well, I think obviously we've had a lot of conversations with voters here in Ottawa County about the security of the election process in the wake of November of last year. And I think it's really important that we engage in making sure that system is as secure as humanly possible. And audits are a huge part of that. And we conduct audits in Michigan. We conduct a lot of audits. And they're very thorough. I mean, our audit process is a 77-point checklist of very detailed procedural items that includes a hand recount of ballots and also a hand count of the applications to vote. And so in other words, we're matching a voter's application and their signature, the number of those applications, make sure those are filled out correctly, and then we're matching that to the number of ballots that we have, as well as verifying results. And those audits are done at random, a random selection of 10% of Michigan's precincts. And so, in 2020, December of 2020, last year, we hand counted 16,500 ballots in Ottawa County. 100% of those were accurate to the machine counts and what was certified. So I think it is important. The other thing I would say, we've had conversations with people that say, well, the cybersecurity is really important and we need to be auditing that. I 100% agree with that. We do need some changes there. Again, one of the common sense things that we need to do is audit our cybersecurity end. And here locally, we've had, Department of Management, Technology, and Budget at the state level, as well as MSP, come in and look at our systems to verify the security of things. That happened prior to the election. And that's great, but that wasn't mandatory. So I think there needs to be some steps in there. Again, it's kind of part of this narrative where, frankly, the Democratic Party says any suggestion of change that would bring better security is just voter suppression. And then the Republican Party says there's fraud inherently happening and we've got to lock down and deny access based on, standards. So like there is a middle ground. And I believe that that's where most of our voters are. And I think that they deserve a secure election that is auditable. But I do agree that I think we need to move forward from 2020. We need to be able to implement some things next year that will allow us to do better.
All right, let's talk a little bit about 2022 and deadlines for the election. Obviously, with statewide offices, they have certain deadlines to meet. The statewide office for a primary would only be for the governor because the Attorney General, Secretary of State offices are the nominees are appointed by the political parties themselves when they have their conventions. But with other offices, when are the dates that people need to know if they wish to run for office before, if there's a special May election or really the primary election in August?
Yeah, great point. So it's always the 12th Tuesday prior to the 12th Tuesday prior to the election is the date for most candidates to file. And so that would put it at about late April for partisan candidates, obviously, who get on the primary ballot and then move on to the general. And as you say, certain statewide offices obviously are not a part of the primary piece. But certainly all at the local level, the county commission and other partisan elected offices at the local and state level, state representative and state senator obviously are going to be big ones as those districts have changed. That filing deadline is going to be, we put it about late April for candidates to officially file for office. And obviously the redistricting process is still ongoing at the state level. We'll be fascinated to see what that looks like in terms of our state House, state Senate, and obviously congressional candidates as well.
When's the drop dead date in your mind to be able to know what districts are going to be in for statewide offices and also for the congressional offices? When do you need to have that information in your hands so that you can be able to set up balloting properly in 2022?
Well, I think the real answer to that would have been yesterday, based on the fact that there is so much that has to be done, and it needs to be proofed and it needs to be accurate before we move forward with programming our ballots. Essentially every record has to be changed at some level, right? Every voter record, so that we know exactly which district every voter is in, so that we can produce the ballots in the quantities and the places that we need. We are optimistic though. I mean, I think we see a vote, it looks like the redistricting commission is voting on December 28th. And then of course there may be some litigation following that. But, I think reasonably, if things are wrapped up by mid-January and we know which direction we are going as administrators, we will take off running from there in terms of getting that data into the voter file and making sure that we have our ballots programmed and ready to go.
One final thing, and this may be more for those who wish to follow elections and results than a lot of the general public. One nice thing about Ottawa County, for the most part, is that the statewide offices pretty much are within Ottawa County's jurisdiction. You don't really have a lot of bleed through with neighboring counties. If this redistricting commission gets what some of the maps are showing, you're going to have to play with neighboring counties to get the results. And I know that sometimes, if it's like a Holland City election, the Allegan County side, they'll put the results in with the Ottawa County, so people only need to go to one place to get the final vote total. Is that going to be the same way as well, hopefully, as we move forward from 2022 and beyond?
That's a great question, Gary. And, unfortunately, the answer to that in most of these cases is no, because we don't have, we have a unique relationship with Allegan County because the city of Holland straddles that border. And so we do have the ability, because of our election programming, to kind of encompass the city of Holland results. But that's really not going to be the case as we extrapolate that out to a number of neighboring counties. It looks like, in the state House and state Senate districts. And so, yeah, one of the seemingly minor things, right, is going to be that challenge then that we're going to have to coordinate a lot better in order to make sure that those results are accumulated and we know who wins the state House and state Senate and obviously congressional races. So,
Justin Roebuck, Ottawa County Clerk, thank you very much. Have a blessed holiday season. We'll talk again next month.
You too, Gary. Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Merry Christmas, Justin Roebuck on 99.7 and 1450 WHTC.